we mentioned, since 1984. So even before Mr. Paul Yoakum was out there. So there's probably other stuff that took place socially, and of course hazardously right, with the toxic waste right now. I remember, I don't know if this is pretty important because throughout the 49 and the decades, probably 59, 69, who knows what took place? No one really knows. You mentioned Baptiste Springs, and you mentioned how much was dumped into the furnace area. I got the opportunity to work at the shell area where the ore was brought in from our reservation, Gay Mines, shipped over there, and then it was processed, mixed with coke, silica, and then those three particulate material made the P4, I guess you're talking about now, and went to the furnace, and there was so much people opportunity. None of our tribe members worked out there. Very few of them really were hired until Taro came about. We had to bring our own law to get our own people hired out there on our reservation. So, and then there was a lot of anger out there as well. Now, that's why I said socially, because some of the non-Indians, no offense, but we were testifying because all this is pretty important as well. Yeah, because we took away jobs. And a lot of the jobs from generation to generation, grandkids to grandparents to grandsons, it was a generation working there. And then we seen that. And we seen that African Americans were brought in. They were packing guns, segregation. They were meant to just do the lower level of working where the most hazardous area was, where some of the others didn't want to work. They were packing guns. They had their own drinking fountains and their own separate restrooms. A lot of that took place, no one really knows about. There's a lot of history there. And besides the dumping of toxic waste that's been there, there's where the furnace comes out, prior to EPA, it was non-regulated, nothing was being regulated out there. It was just being dumped right to the ground. It was some individuals that worked there longer than I have told me stories. And a lot of them are out here could testify, but they don't like to come testify. But Ryan was saying, I worked with her husband. I worked with others out there, and some are gone now. A lot of them, ended up with the kidney transplant. A lot of them, it's just sad because from contractors to the regular employees there. There was this area called a tiger pit where we used to work. We used to tap the furnace, the metal and the slag. And they come out like molten lava, and it was a hotter part, the heavier metal. And for a while, they just dumped right into the ground. And then that was unregulated until EPA came about. And finally, they go, hey, let's do this, and et cetera. And then so many things took place. You walk in there, and holy, you're shocked. Because, it's dirty, but I always wore a respirator. Some never. Some individuals never wore respirators. They were expendable, they didn't care. Then you look at the obituary, a lot of those guys retired, they're gone. I remember a guy worked there with us. He was 69 years old. He said, how come you're still working here? I have to. So if I could last longer, I'll get a bigger retirement money to make ends meet for my family. I'm sacrificing for my family. And then he passed away. He didn't even get retired. And a lot of our employees were angry. This is what this company did. It's good, million man hours. It's good, the safety stuff there that took place, but there's so many other stuff that took place that's not being told in detail. And I think it's only been a one-sided reporting. No offense to FMC, but if you think about it, all this analyzing and all this reporting, investigation hasn't been. It should be a thorough investigation like a murder case, forensic audit. All this. If somebody gets murdered, you're going to want to find everything that happened. You're going to want to find out Michael Jackson, holy, according to every detail. They're even bringing out that doctor's wives, holy, because you find out what's going on. When OJ, look how thorough investigation that took place. See, that's what needs to happen here. If EPA is going to do their job and follow their title, protection agency and protecting the environment. Wow, I'd be proud to be working for something to go out there and find out what's going on. That should be the number one goal, go down in history. You did something in your life and you'd be proud of it, instead of just being there. So I think this is too soon, this interim. I think it needs to go further, more thorough investigation, and the headquarters need to get all the regions involved. Because this is happening. The Mohawk Reservation and St. Ignatius Mohawks, their river was on fire. I don't know if you guys know about that. But some of the, I'm part of the National Tribal Caucus from all the regions. Going to all these different tribes, they all have all kinds of similar situations as well. Contamination, pollution. Their river was on fire. You drop something and there's flames on. It took forever to clean that up. And there's an area here in Washington, Montana, Coeur d'Alene was cleaned up, and how long is it going to take? So that's why I think other agencies should jump in along with the EPA, since EPA is only new. And then we got those laws, 8072 mining laws, all the ore that's been taken from gay mines still sitting there, part of it's on that slag pile. That slag pile is worth a lot of money. I talked to individual scientists from my DOE Department of Energy. They said, hey, that's already condensed. Man, we could take that. We don't have to go dig up any more raw material. That's already condensed. We could use that. It's already there. We'll save money. It's worth millions and millions of dollars. And then that ferrophosphate that's already over there, that's from the metal. I already heard China already bought it. So the Chinese already paid for it. So it's already sold without even all this rod. And it's interim rod's already had interim, behind the scenes interim rod, record of decision. So I don't know, I don't want you, on that public meeting ground rules, hold it, we can't say anything delicately because of the non-Indian language on there. So we got to be careful what we say, but I'm not picking on nobody, I don't want to pick on nobody. But I think, no offense, but since EPA's been here, since the politicians been on board, the voters, who's the voters? Taxpayers, and it's all about jobs, it's all about money. And where's the natural damage claims? And there's the statute of limitations. If it goes past 7 years, oh, you can't touch us. Oh, and all these little laws, they've only been written one-sided, without proper consultation. Clean Water Act, for example, Clean Air Act, 1872 Mining Law, all these laws and acts need to be amended. They need to be amended, especially the 1872 Mining Law. We're never going to get nowhere because those laws are protecting, the EPA can't do anything because that law protects it. And so, in order for us to move forward, the EPA needs to come in, but they can't do anything because they're a federal agency, so it's up to the people to petition. Who's going to back us up? Well, I'd like to see FMC turn it around. Turn yourself around, clean it up, and hey, be the lead in the world, and be a professional company and say, hey, we're going to clean this environment. Take the lead in the world. The people will say, hey, FMC is a great company. Let's bring them on. We don't have to worry about them. But if you go this other route, the FMC is evil. We don't want them. All they do is destroy the land. They don't try to fix it, remedy it, rectify it. Turn it around. Let's clean it up better instead of covering it up, capping it. That's what I like to see. I'd like to say more, but I think my 3 minutes is up. So, no offense to Paul's my buddy. I see him once in a while. But still, and I see the other guy too, they're always working out. But still, think about it. If you was on the other side or this other side, you'd be fighting for this other way around, right? But you're getting paid, so you're going to have to protect what you're fighting for, even though you're in the wrong. You're going to go down in history, as an evil person because you destroyed our Mother Earth. And it's like a disease, incurable disease that's been created by man that needs to be, all it's going to do is give it a few shots here and there, a Band-Aid over the wound or something. So I think it needs to be cured up all the way to the max, otherwise it's never going to, we're never going to get nowhere. So put your heart forward, bring your heart out, forget about everything else. I'd like to see you guys come out with a better attitude, turn it around, and be really who you are. Be heroes and Region 10, back us up. Otherwise, we're just up there as puppets.
Okay, next up we have Tony Galloway. I'm not sure if he is still with us. Tony Galloway.
I'd like to make comments on behalf of Chairman Smalley.
Okay. Do you want me to bring this over there? And can you say and spell your name so the court reporter can get it? Thank you.
Good evening. First of all, I'd like to thank everyone for the turnout tonight to show your support, your community interest in this matter of great importance. My name is Blaine Edmo, B-L-A-I-N-E. Edmo is E-D-M-O. I'm a member of the Fort Hall Business Council, and I've served 6 terms now. But Chairman Small asked me to appear on his behalf tonight because he's in Washington, D.C. speaking to our congressional delegation regarding environmental matters and other matters of tribal interest. So, on behalf of the tribe, what we would like to, and I'm going to make these comments very brief. I think we've argued back and forth with EPA and with FMC for a number of years. I think what it boils down to is that we all agree on one point, but I think the problem with that point is, what is cleanup? You've heard the position here tonight on an interim ROD, or record of decision. They're saying that capping these contaminants under the ground or in the soil or on the slag pile is cleanup. We say no. We say that's a cover-up, plain and simple. All we're doing is leaving a problem in place for the next 10,000 years. The contaminants, the heavy metals that are contained in the soils, in the groundwater, they're going to be there for the next 10,000 years. We've heard comments from tribal members about the concern they have for their families, their children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren, people that are yet to be born. We're not addressing those issues about removing these contaminants from that site. We've had a lot of discussion. We've had a lot of back and forth arguments about this. But what it boils down to is this plan is not going to work. All we're doing is maintaining the status quo. We're leaving these contaminants in place. We're putting a layer of soil over it. And this monitoring, well, they say they're going to monitor, but the problem with the monitoring is you're only monitoring on the surface. You may be using test wells, but the contaminants such as the phos and the other heavy metals in the soil, they're not going to do any monitoring under the soil. So how do we know what's happening and what type of reactions are there occurring 10 feet, 20 feet, 50 feet, 90 feet below the ground? Those are all unknowns. There needs to be answers, like was said here earlier. We need to hear solutions. We don't need to hear, like Councilman Tyler said, we don't need to have a Band-Aid on a broken leg. That's not going to work. We need to have answers that will work for our community, not only the Shoshone Bannock tribes, but for the entire southeastern Idaho community. I'm not happy with what I've heard here this afternoon or this evening from the Environmental Protection Agency. I believe that they're shirking their trust responsibility to the tribe, to the tribal membership. As an agent for the United States government, we signed a treaty with the United States government and ratified by the United States Congress. In that, we made a pledge for peace, and we would remain here in this location for as long as we had to remain here as a people. And that wasn't 10 years, 20 years, 50 years, it's for eternity, or for how long we exist. What we're doing here is we're allowing to have a major Superfund site remain in our homeland that we signed a peace treaty for, and allow it to remain there untouched. Basically, all we're doing is covering it and hoping it's going to magically disappear. Well, it's not going to do that. We have a 10,000-year legacy here, and we need to address it. And we're proposing pilot projects. We're not saying to clean up the entire site. We're saying doing pilot projects to see if we can find the technology to remove some of these contaminants. The testing of the water pumping and treating, you heard the testimony here. They're not telling you what percentage of the groundwater is going to be treated and how much contamination is continue to flow out into the Portneuf, the Fort Hall Bottoms, American Falls Reservoir, and the Snake River. That hasn't been addressed. Nor have we heard about the reliability of these caps, how long they're going to last. I've read technology from the Department of Energy on their caps, these so-called 100-year caps. Many of them last 3 to 5 to 10, some of them 20 years if they're lucky. They're not fail-safe. So these are remedies that are just short-term goals. They're not going to work. And we want the opportunity to be allowed to do some cleanup that may work and remove this contamination from this site. And as far as redevelopment, I think you've heard a number of stories, and from what we've been told, the actual percentage of that site that's going to be developed is very minimal. And they're going to have industrial controls. You're not going to be able to drink the water. You're not going to be able to use it in any everyday use. Many of these places will be restricted on what actually can be done. And it was mentioned earlier, the term, the principal parties. And what wasn't addressed is if they do redevelopment was those companies that are going to move on to this. If there are other contaminants that appear in the next 20 or 30 years, are they going to be liable as well for that contamination? I know that was discussed several years ago by our attorneys and other attorneys. And the issue about there being a principal party in this Superfund site, well, the development, that's all fine and well, but you have to understand what those terms are going to be and what limitations there's going to be. It's not going to be a wide open place. They're going to have a lot of restrictions that's going to control what happens there. So, to keep our comments to the point, we want the opportunity to do other treatment plans. And we don't believe the interim rod is going to do the job or address the real issue. We ask EPA to reconsider what they're planning on doing, and for what it's worth, we hope that they will do that. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to take a couple more from the list and then we'll go back to the audience. Is Maxine Edmo still here? Maxine? Okay. Would you like me to bring the mic? Oh, do you want to speak from your seat? And can you spell your name when you start? Thank you.
I'd like to turn my time over to Louise first, because she signed up before I did, and she's my daughter.
Oh, okay, we were trying to show respect to you, but that's perfectly fine. Go ahead.
You gotta speak anyway.
I don't want to go. Is it on?
Get it? Go.
It's on.
No? Okay. Sorry about that.
My name is Maxine Racehorse Edmo, and I'm you spell it by M-A-X-I-N-E is a first name. Racehorse is my maiden name, R-A-C-E-H-O-R-S-E. And my last name is Edmo, E-D-M-O. And I'm very proud of my name. I'm very proud of my ancestors. And I'm proud of those people that, in the beginning, that signed a treaty with the U.S. government, a peace treaty. And this home here at Fort Hall is our last place that we have as a homeland for our people. There's a lot of encroachment from the different counties that I don't feel they should, they don't respect our people here at Fort Hall. And I disagree with what's going on. And tonight, I was very disappointed with the way this meeting was held. It's just like going to a public school in Blackfoot and being put down by a school board. They give you about 2 or 3 minutes to speak and that's it. And you have to sit down. So I think there should have been a better set of, a better way for providing input by our people. Look how many hours went by. And it's close to midnight. To me, there should have been more respect for our Shoshone Bannock tribal members. And I didn't see that tonight. I believe that EPA has a trust responsibility as well as other federal agencies of the U.S. government. I've been to Congress for many years on other issues. And that's where you get respect by the senators and congressmen on a lot of the things that have happened in the past. And I believe that EPA needs to stand up and step up to their responsibility with this cleanup. I don't believe in this cover-up that they're talking about, the Band-Aid effect. I disagree with that. If you understood the Shoshone language tonight that was said, the Bannock prayer, the Shoshone prayer that was said, to me that was really awesome. The words that were said tonight. Our people don't pray just for our people, it's for everybody. For health. The water is prayed for constantly. You see that picture up there? That's a good example of how we want our land to be. And this land was not contaminated. We were able to go drink water anywhere, our people were. And we gave up a lot of land. Our people gave up millions of acres of land, and this is our last homeland. So I really feel that it needs to be cleaned up. All of this, we make use of all of this, the trees, the sagebrush. People might think it's just nothing, but to us it's our way of life. We used to go out and pick berries. And look at the gay mine. There's another good example of what needs to be cleaned up. We have no choke cherries left up there or service berries. That's what our people lived on in order to survive. The cedar trees. There's a purpose for everything. And our people need to be respected for their beliefs. If it wasn't for our people, you people would not have survived, the non-Indian people. I know I'm kind of going out of what I'm supposed to be speaking about, but I really feel that I do not agree with this cover-up that you're talking about. You know, people out at the site out here, they use robots to do things. Why not do that? I know other places have. What happened to all the scientists? There's many other ways of getting around things. And I bet you never even checked into anything like that. This is really dangerous out there. I've had relatives that worked out there, and they have asthma, cancer, you name it, we've got it out here. My mother lived at Gibson, that's by the Ferry Butte, right out in that direction. And I live at Ross Fork, and she said every morning she'd see that smoke headed right up to where we live, at Ross Fork. And it's not only us, it's southeast Idaho. Our water needs to be cleaned up. You can't even go down there and get greens like for the Sundance anymore on the Portneuf. That Portneuf River started on our reservation, and it goes all the way down through the Snake River. We used to have clean water down there, and good fish, all kinds of good fish. And some of it might still be good, but it's really scary what happens to our food. And you don't see hardly any animals anymore either. Our people lived on rabbits and things like that. Birds. And you see very few birds anymore. Those are the concerns that I have, as well as a lot of our people. Our people, they don't get up and speak like they should. They have concerns, they'll express it to us. I remember years ago they used to tell me, why didn't you say this? Why didn't you say that? I said, you have a voice too. I said, you know, you can speak up. A lot of our people can. But this is the concern I have. I really don't feel that EPA is doing their job, as well as the other federal agencies. They do not believe in tribal sovereignty, evidently, or maybe they don't know what that means. So I really feel that that needs to be cleaned up out there. Our water, our land, that whole area, those cars that were buried, I've heard talk about that too. Like I said, I've had relatives that worked out there. Some of them are gone now. A lot of them have asthma, cancer, you name it. And that's another thing, is the health studies that need to be done. And who's going to fund that? I don't believe there's ever been a study on that. So that's another portion of what should be looked at. There's many areas that are left out. And it's of concern to our people. There's other things that I'd like to say too, but I'm going to put it in black and white. And make sure you send it to the right place, because evidently there's a lot of EPA people here, but you need to send it to the right place or probably get thrown in the trash with what I've seen tonight. That's just the way I feel. Thank you.
One thing, just for the record. The one thing I forgot, pardon me, on behalf of the Shoshone Bannock Tribes, we'd like to also reserve the right to submit written comments before the end of this commentary period. Thank you.
I see potentially just one more tribal elder on this list, and then I'll go to, to Nancy Eshele. I apologize. You will definitely need to spell that one for us.
Nancy Michelin. NENCYESCHIEF I'm a member of the Shoshone Bannock Tribes, and I too am concerned about the FMC site and all the ramifications that have occurred. There were several agencies involved in that in the Bureau of Indian Affairs. I just wondered, they haven't been a friend to us Indians. The Corps of Engineers, who is not an independent contractor, is a federal agency. And the Corps of Engineers, you know, if you know Indian history, they've always put dams on Indian lands and literally destroyed many Indian properties in the country, the United States. I see this as really a political ploy with this whole FMC business and EPA. Now we have this being respectful, but I'm talking about institutions here. The industrial institution and a federal institution, or institutions. You know, big money makes people move. And that seems to be the trend this year, and many years since this government has been around here. I'm talking about the government, I mean the U.S. government. It's getting worse. If you got the money, you get what you need done. This country is lacking in their integrity, lacking in democracy, lacking on those very contracts that we have in our Fort Bridger Treaty. EPA has expressed tonight that they understand, they read the treaty. But it's hard to really understand till you've lived it, you've seen it, you've seen people die. Not only from the supposed FMC, the contamination. And many of our people have died to even get over here from the U.S. Army. Pocatello, you know, was once Shoshone Bannock land, almost down to the Utah border. Would have we lost that under some false information? The tribe still owns land in the Pocatello area. It may be on supposed fee land or non-Indian ownership now, but it's still the reservation, and we want to protect that. I've talked to some people at some of the meetings just recently about coming here to testify, and I think Mrs. Edmo has expressed sometimes people don't really want to get up and talk about these things. Is it going to go anywhere? Is it going to do anything? I still didn't get an answer for an independent review of all this, the hearing information that you're going to review. Who's going to do the review? You there?
Sorry.
I don't even think what are we just talking to the wind, I guess?
No, actually, it was a matter of you were in the comment phase, and so I was treating it as such.
Well, I have a question.
But,
That's
okay,
the question.
I know, and I'm answering it. Thank you. Basically, it would be me and basically what the response to the summary will be from me and the team. Basically, we'll be evaluating all of the questions against everything.
So it's not an independent, it's going to be an in-house review.
The response to comments is done by EPA in responding to the comments. We did make reference to an independent review. We've been communicating with the tribal council. They've expressed a desire to have another independent review of all of the information that's led up to our decision. And we're in discussions with tribal council on what that might look like, what the objectives might be, how it might be structured. So we will be working with tribal council on that.
And you will also be working with the tribal attorneys for the tribe, as well as our agents of the tribe pertaining to environment, such as Ms. Hanson and Kelly Wright.
That's right.
In a cooperative manner. I know over the last few years, there seemed to be some confrontation when our people tried to impress upon you the needs of the tribes, express the needs of the tribe, and really get that place cleaned up or starting that avenue of cleanup. What did you do? Call somebody in and say, hey, these guys are really not cooperative, or there's conflict. It just doesn't make sense to me. But I guess that's nothing new for us Indian people, you know. We've been driven to try to understand or realize what is right, what is just. And there needs to be real justice here. There are rules and regulations. But who's making these rules and regulations? If you've got lobbyists back in Washington, D.C. from a large global universal company, they got the money to do it. I recall Governor Kempthorne, when he became the Secretary of the Interior, his legal counsel, Mr. Goldberg, went up to EPA as the acting director, Region 10. The tribes seem to be having a real difficult means to really get the point we want this whole thing cleaned up. We want them to follow our rules because this is the Shoshone Bannock land. We have our own ordinances, our own laws, and Mrs. Eno again spoke about the respect and people wanting to, or should, obey our laws because we are a sovereign nation. I wanted to point out one thing from the Blackfoot newspaper about the rivers down here in the Blackfoot area. Some farmers said, oh, it was up in the Firth area. Some farmers said, well, the Indians, they just want to have stuff given to them. They haven't given us anything, you know, but they took the whole United States. And I'm pretty bitter about that. The legal end of this United States has treated the Indians badly in a lot of their cases, majority of cases. So I would think that this cleanup, they should just dig it all out. I think it's well to do it in the concentrated areas. However, I think they need to go further than that as well. May take a few $1 billion, but FMC's made multi-billion dollars off of this reservation. Billions, maybe trillions, I don't know. That's a lot of money there, a lot of money. And we're a small tribe. Other Indians are facing the same problems too, but we need to clean this up. And I don't know if the council is going to do any suits on these federal agencies, but something needs to be done. And EPA can start by doing that. And FMC could even start doing that. Like what Mr. Tyler had indicated, they can be first to say, let's clean it up. They've got to start cleaning up everything, whether it's in Japan or China or anywhere else. They need to have their own means of treatment. They can extract and do their treatment. If EPA knew this was occurring and there was no treatment, you should have stopped them. It just doesn't make sense what some of these agencies can do. So something's more valuable in the minds of these people, whether it's the political high they get or the money they get, whatever it may be, but let's look down to what you are, environmental protection. And that's what needs to happen here. Clean it all up, get rid of it. You say health and human safety. Whether it's 10,000 years, 20,000, 50,000 years, it's got to be cleaned up. Collaborate with DOE if you have to do it. If you don't have a research team to hire some people that can have the ability to do the cleanup, to do the testing, to do the pilot projects. There's always a way of getting things done. So I strongly enforce the method of cleaning the entire area up out there. The health assessment, I worked as a SEP coordinator for the tribe on that for almost 2 years, along with the tribal team. There were so many restrictions that the tribe couldn't use. They got to use the FMC data, the data that already existed. Can't talk to any of the employees of FMC. That thing has not been completed yet. There was a short one done by the Northwest Portland Area Indian Health Board assessment team in Portland, but it just mirrored some of the information they got from the Idaho Registry of Cancer and IHS. Didn't really tell you who, what, when, how old. A poor study. And they communicated very little with the tribes on that one. And there's not enough money. There was $1.2 million set aside for them to do SEP 14, the health assessments of our people that are on the reservation. It's really a one-sided deal, but there's been almost $800,000. How much left now to do the study? But they're not going to be able to complete a real good study without more money. But EPA says, well, that's supposed to be the minimum, maybe 1.5 million. That's what I said. And there's got to be more money for that study. Because people have been hurt, and many of our people have already died, but FMCs, well, we don't know if it's because of their own smoking, or is it the cedarine that's causing their lung cancer, or things like that. A lot of ifs, ands, and buts that could happen on that. But that study needs to be done. And EPA needs to force FMC to put more money into that assessment, health assessment, SEP 14. Clean the place up. We need that. We need your power, your regulations, and I hope Congress, the Republicans, don't want to get rid of EPA's regulations. I don't know where that's at, you know. But we need that, especially here on our reservation. Clean it up, make them clean everything else when they're digging up stuff. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Nancy. Next, we have Marvin Osborne. Is Marvin here? No? Okay. So now what I'd like to do, that's all the elders I had signed up for and tribal council. Is there any other elders in the audience who wanted to give formal comments, testimony, and then we'll go to more of a question and answer format where we'll continue to record.
Well, are you going to go off that list and sign
Yes,
up?
yes, but I'm not sure that everyone that wants to ask questions signed up. So I was thinking I would go to the audience first and then come back to the list, kind of go back and forth.
Well, why did we wait all this time to offer
Yeah.
testimony if you're just going to jump around?
Well, I'm fine going off the list. I want to do what works for you all. It sounds like you'd prefer just to keep going off the list.
No, everybody knows I'm an elder.
Okay, well, why don't we keep going on the list, and we can adjust again as need be. So I'm going to start at the top of the list now. Louise Dixie. Okay. You've been waiting very patiently, Louise.
Well, I do have some written testimony. It's really brief and to the point, but my name is Louise Edmo Dixie, Louise Edmo is my maiden name, Dixey. I've had the opportunity to serve on the For All Business Council, to raise my family here in southeastern Idaho. I'm a direct descendant of Boise Shoshones, Yellowstone Bannocks. Both sides of my family are Bannocks and Shoshones. And I know our people were pushed here to Fort Hall from several different bands. And as my mom stated, this is our last homeland. In Bannock, it's called Viwa. That means our final homeland. But I'm a member of the Shoshone Bannock Tribe. I've lived on the Fort Hall Indian Reservation all of my life. And my testimony is offered in opposition to the proposed changes to the cleanup plan for the FMC operable unit for several reasons. First of all, I think the approach that EPA has taken is really a piecemeal approach. There's never really been a comprehensive plan, as Taibos say, and Taibos in both the Bannock and Shoshone language means the white man. You know, we're always told that you need to have a plan for completing anything. But when it comes to Superfund sites, and especially those located, almost every Superfund site in the country is located next to an Indian reservation. How ironic. We're always left with the cleanup after the white man. And that's the case we are here at Fort Hall. The Eastern Michaud Flats Superfund site has been managed in a piecemeal manner since 2003. And while the intent of the Superfund designation was to clean up the site, regulatory and management mechanisms, and many times I believe political motives, have led to the FMC site and Simplot site being separated into operable units by the federal agencies. And perhaps this is due to the different political jurisdictions involved in the regulatory scheme at this site. But for whatever reason, it is clear to me that an overall long-term and broader perspective is lacking. We allow FMC to do one thing, bypass the rules, develop their own planning mechanisms, but it isn't good for Simplot. So I think it's important to remember, and everybody seems to forget, that this entire area is part of the original Fort Hall Indian Reservation. But due to constant encroachments by non-Indians and the railroad and the original boundaries of the reservation have been reduced from $1.8 million, or 1.8 million acres in 1867 to 544,000 acres today. The city of Pocatello was created by cessions of tribal lands within the reservation. Even railroads were built through the reservation without any rights-of-ways. And it was only after the fact that the rights-of-ways were granted, and only because of political pressure that was put on our Idaho congressional delegation by railroad corporate people. Elemental phosphorus is a toxic waste that will require several thousand years to dissipate. And that's to my elemental understanding. I'm not a professional on any of these issues. I mean, my degree is in political science. But at least, you know, I have some common sense. I understand that we have a real short lifetime. I know Indian people have been here forever, based upon our teachings. And we'll be here long after these corporations, EPA, any other political entity is gone. We'll still be here. But in my opinion, the tribal people will still be here taking care of the land, despite the EPA statement that the proposed changes will better protect the environment. The Portneuf River begins and ends, like my mom said, on the Fort Hall Indian Reservation. But one of my public policy classes, I had to go study what the effects of contaminants were on the Portneuf River. And there are all kinds of graduate students that have undertaken this question. You can go to ISU's library. Graduate students have studied this issue over and over and over again. And there's been testing of the Portneuf River throughout its course. But the worst contamination takes place at or near Simplot site and FMC site. And you can't tell me that this picture that we were handed, showing these different elevations, actually portrays a true picture of the groundwater transfer, where it moves to. I could believe some of this information if we had some long-term studies of the groundwater. Having worked for the tribal attorneys for several years and being involved with the Snake River Basin adjudication, I know that the groundwater studies that were completed in this area indicate that the flows below the surface are far different than what the surface water is showing us. So the topography that's shown on those maps doesn't mean a thing to me, because the underground water aquifer is totally different. And that's been proven time and time again. And we know that's what's happening in our environment is we're creating an underground desert on our own reservation through irrigation by pumping groundwater where we don't have the recharge that we've had in prior years through different types of irrigation methods. So the state of Idaho, Idaho Department of Water Resources, has undertaken a number of groundwater studies. And I could understand if EPA was relying upon those studies. But no, it seems to me we're relying upon the offender here to protect the offended. And that's totally ridiculous. Doesn't make sense. But I think we have a tribal water resources department that has employed one of the most world-renowned experts on groundwater to assist with being our tribal water engineer. And the studies that they have undertaken have been supported by NASA. And I can't believe that EPA cannot find technology to drill into that slag pit out there at FMC. When our little Chauvin school students teamed with NASA to monitor the outflow of our salmon smolts on the Yankee Fork in the Salmon River drainage all the way to the ocean and return, and NASA supported that project. Why can't we get some help from the other federal agencies to monitor this simple little project? My husband was a mining foreman at the Gate Mine for 14 years. He operated a shovel there for many years. But they were able to go down more than 200 feet in those pits at Gate Mine. He worked there for 29 and a half years until they shut down in '93. But I've been in those pits when they were operating those, and you can go down that far at the mine to get the ore, then you sure as hell can get to the bottom of that slag pit in one way or another. And we've spent the money to get the ore, then let's spend the money to protect ourselves. But the Shoshone Bannock tribes have been involved in the cleanup in an advisory role. EPA has excluded the tribes from monitoring and decision-making since the Superfund designation. I know that for a fact. The tribe has been forced to take legal and judicial challenges to force the parties to the so-called cleanup to hear our views. And as tribal members, as many of you heard already, from Rowena, from Liwan, from all of the other tribal people here, we all know that we utilize the water, the air, the land, the plants and animals in our daily lives. And you know, every morning we're always told to wake up and say a prayer, drink a glass of water, because the water is a source of life. But we're always constantly reminded of the contamination created by the FMC facility, by the declining air quality. I'm a Ross Fork girl. I was born and raised there. And for years and years, we saw that contamination, that big plume of smog coming over the mountain. And it just settled there in Ross Fork. And one thing that I noticed throughout the years is that, you know, we never heard of asthma before among our people. But ever since we've had those big plants in operation, there have been changes in our people's quality of life. We see a real decline in the native plants in the Michaud area. And we all know that you used to be able to find a lot of buffalo grass there for the sundances, and white sage, and tules. But you don't find a lot of them now, or if you do, you want to be careful because they might be contaminated. You don't want to take them into that spiritual place. But the warnings of increased mercury that are found in the fish harvested in that area have been issued by our own tribal fisheries department. So our biologists have issued warnings that are based upon scientific findings and studies. So I don't think we want to be like the Wisconsin tribes who can't even harvest fish in their traditional areas because there's too much acid rain. So I think we need to really be careful and think long and hard about what type of cleanup we want. I don't want to cover up. There's been too much of that. And sad to say that we've even hired a person to help with that cover-up, to be our spokesman. But I joined the tribe and demanded that EPA reconsider this proposed change. You know, the idea that we should have an interim ROD, or record of decision. The interim ROD will not allow the tribe to apply our tribal standards. And if we had an actual record of decision, then we would have some measurement over a 5-year period. But with the interim ROD, we don't have that requirement. And I think, I don't know what why they made that decision. I don't know a whole lot about this topic, but I've read the information. And you know, that's one thing about having a college background is you learn critical thinking skills. And one of those skills that you develop is to think for yourself and use some rational analysis. Well, it appears to me that if we don't have a record of decision issued, then we never have to comply with tribal standards. We never have to have a completed remedy. We don't have to have any measurement standards in place. And we don't have FMC suing us. But I truly believe that we need to reconsider, EPA needs to reconsider their proposed change and do something worthwhile to protect our environment, not just the river.